Senator Knudsen moves that a committee of 3 on the part of the Senate and a committee of 4 on the part of the House be appointed to escort the Honorable David Gilbertson, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, to the rostrum.
It's been moved and seconded. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. The President announces such committee members as Senators Knudsen, Dempster, and Heideprim, and Representatives Roden, Dykstra, Hargens, and Gillespie. Members of the House and Senate, Chief Justice David Gilbertson is a native of Sisseton. He received his undergraduate degree from South Dakota State University in 1972 and his Juris Doctor from the University of South Dakota School of Law in 1975. He engaged in private practice for 11 years. During this time, he also served as Roberts County Deputy State's Attorney and as City Attorney for the City of Sisseton. He was appointed to the Circuit Court bench in 1986. After nearly a decade on the Circuit Court bench, Chief Justice Gilbertson was appointed to the Supreme Court in April of 1995 to represent the 5th Supreme Court District. He was retained by the voters in the 1998 general election, and in September of 2001, Justice Gilbertson was elected Chief Justice by the members of the court. In 2006, Chief Justice Gilbertson was retained by the voters again by a wide margin. Born in 1949, Chief Justice Gilbertson and his wife Deborah have 4 children. He is past president of the South Dakota Judges Association, is a member of the Glacial Lakes Bar Association, the Brown County Bar Association, and the South Dakota Bar Association. Will the Sergeant at Arms please announce the arrival of the Chief Justice?
Lieutenant Governor and members of the legislature, the Honorable Chief Justice of the South Dakota Supreme Court, David Gilbertson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome. Governor Rounds, Lieutenant Governor Dugard, Speaker Diedrich, members of the legislature, constitutional officers, my fellow justices, circuit court judges, employees of the unified judicial system, and citizens of the state of South Dakota. It is my pleasure as Chief Justice of the South Dakota Supreme Court to present you with an oral and a written report of the state of the South Dakota Judiciary. I am pleased to report to you that the unified judicial system is strong and working well to meet the challenges that face it. All of us hopefully have a method of getting away from the pressures and the pace of everyday life. For me, it's a summer weekend trip to my lake cabin in Marshall County. There I can contemplate the handiwork of nature that created glacial lakes many thousands of years ago. For me, it's my Garden of Eden. At my lake cabin, I often come into contact with a neighbor who possesses an uncanny ability to view and assess the human situation. He's repeatedly told me, David, all kids are good kids. The trick is to keep them alive. Since becoming a prosecutor in 1975 and a judge in 1986, I've had occasion to doubt the positive nature of my friend's observation. However, what he is telling us is that it is crucial to focus on humanity. Does society interact with troubled juveniles in a positive manner, which may or may not bear fruit, or in a manner that does not focus on their humanity? Unfortunately, while we focus on keeping kids alive, we cannot, in all cases, mold them into productive citizens. We must protect society from those individuals who cannot be reformed. We rely on our judges to make that crucial and often very difficult determination. Nationwide, we are advised by experts that the pace of life is exceeding our ability to cope, both personally and as a society. For all of us, there are days when the pace of life seems to be beyond control. Unfortunately, for some in this state, the escape from life's problems is into the world of illegal drugs. In the past few years, we have become increasingly aware that the drug problem is not just somewhere else. It's also on our own doorstep. We recognize this and have taken important steps to combat illegal drugs and reverse their effects. This governor and this legislature supported the establishment of a drug court in the northern Black Hills. This drug court's main focus is on methamphetamine addiction. It began operation on July 1st, 2007, and its success or failure will be realized in increments over time. In a society hooked on instant results, patience is needed so that this tree we have planted can bear fruit. A few years ago, a Western journalist asked the Chinese premier if he thought there were any positive results from the bloody French Revolution of 1789. The Chinese premier's serious reply was, "It's too soon to tell." Fortunately, we will not have to wait that long to assess the effects of the drug court. We were the 50th state, and thus the last, to establish this type of treatment program. The drug court program is based on successful models from other states, so we have every reason to expect a positive outcome. We estimate that we will be able to gauge the permanent effectiveness of the drug court program in the next 12 to 18 months. At that time, we will know whether the first citizens who have enrolled in the program have successfully graduated. After completing the program, there is the underlying question of whether the recovered addict can indeed remain recovered. This program is designed to ensure that result. Participation in a drug court is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Those allowed into the program are screened to identify their potential for successfully completing it. Besides intensive probation, they are expected to get jobs, maintain their own homes, and take care of the children they have. They are also expected to appear in front of a judge in court once a week, dressed in their Sunday best. Recently, a participant in the program arrived for drug court 1 hour late. Rather than accepting any excuses, the judge emphasized the consequences of not appearing on time by immediately placing the participant in drug court in jail for 2 days. According to the participant's attorney, upon her release, she was angry with the judge, the team, and the court service officer. However, today in court, she admitted that it was her fault and she accepted full responsibility. The attorney concluded that, "We believe this is a good sign." Last week, I received an update from Judge Eckridge on the status of the drug court program in the Northern Hills. He has 6 persons who have been accepted into that program. They range in age from 23 to 50, but for this program, they would all be in the penitentiary. These 6 persons have 15 children, who, but for this program, if the children were minors, would probably be in the custody of DSS. All 6 persons are employed full-time, with the exception of one on maternity leave. For some, this is the first full-time job they've held in years. All 6 persons are tested 3 times a week for drugs, and not one of them has yet to fail to pass the test. Although the program and these folks have a long way to go, so far, so good. In other areas of the state, the drug problem continues unabated. If the UJS establishes that the Northern Hills pilot project is a success, I anticipate I will be asking this legislature in an upcoming year to consider funding of a drug court program in central South Dakota. Presiding Judge Lori Wilbur identified her circuit as an area in need of this type of a program. While currently the Northern Hills program focuses primarily on methamphetamine, Judge Wilbur proposes a program that deals not only with meth, but also other illegal drugs and alcohol. In Minnehaha County, the Second Circuit has opted for a third approach that takes advantage of the various treatment programs already available in this urban area. In these programs, more time is spent on treating the addict outside the courtroom rather than in a courtroom setting such as a drug court. The availability and use of these many local resources created as a result of urban growth in the Sioux Falls area by this circuit is commendable. These three approaches to dealing with the problems of substance abuse show us that in this land of infinite variety, no single approach works because of differences in geography, population, and resources. As the Justice of the United States Supreme Court once observed, the individual states are an experimental lab for governmental improvements. So too are the various substance abuse programs in South Dakota. If we are fortunate enough to find a magic answer, the magic will be in the ability to tailor a cure to local needs and resources. In time, we will find that answer. However, time, as noted by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., time is neutral, and it alone changes nothing. People either make changes during time or they do not. I am fully aware that it is a privilege on this state occasion to address this legislature and this governor and these constitutional officers on important subjects. When addressing you, I do not speak solely for myself as the Chief Justice, the judiciary, or the legal profession. On this subject, I simply speak for the mothers and the fathers who have seen their children fall into the torment of drug abuse and who, for the most part, remain helpless. Since these parents cannot be here today, on their behalf, I thank Governor Rounds and this legislature for helping these parents and these troubled children. As Henry Ford observed, coming together is the beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. My friend at my lake cabin builds houses for wood ducks to nest in. As wood ducks nest in these tree houses, we are able to watch the ducks work to hatch and raise their young. It's a thrill to see these young ducks leave my friend's wood houses with their mothers for the first time and to watch them start their lives in nature's world. My friend says he constructs and maintains these wood duck houses because he comments families can use a little help now and then. South Dakota courts deal with the wide spectrum of criminal conduct and defendants. At one end of the spectrum are the defendants who are in the wrong place at the wrong time and made a wrong choice. They are easy to rehabilitate and not likely to repeat their crimes. At the other end of the spectrum are those who commit crimes of such a serious magnitude that justice calls for incarceration, often for lengthy periods of time. There remains, however, a middle group who could be salvaged or who could continue in a downward spiral. It's a good monetary investment in our state's future to put these people in a type of supervised probation that stresses the error of their ways and assists them in avoiding the trap of repetition. While we've had supervised probationary programs for a long time, their success is directly tied to the number of clients served by each probation officer. A probation officer who supervises over 125 individuals can do little more than greet each client when they report in. We need to offer more supervision and advice than the attention one would receive from a greeter when entering a discount store. In our intensive probation program, however, each officer has substantially fewer clients. That is why the program has been so successful. Without intensive probation, the only reasonable alternative for society is to incarcerate these individuals. Gone are the days when a stern lecture or a kind word would straighten out most wayward adult or juvenile offenders. Unless root problems are successfully addressed, the person under supervised probation and society, which pays the bills, are doomed to repeated trips to a courthouse, time after time. In an attempt to break this cycle, I'm asking the legislature for increased funding for community-based services for adults and juveniles so that they can remain in their communities. These services are provided in that community where they live, saving significant costs of incarceration. These services identify the risks and needs of the clients and provide the resources to overcome or solve the underlying problem. These resources include mental health treatment, chemical dependency treatment, and other needed services. Remember the old oil filter commercial? You can pay me now or pay me later. Well, that applies here. To accomplish these goals, as well as the constitutional and statutory duties placed upon it, the UJS will request a budget increase of 5.8% in general funds appropriations and an overall budgetary increase of 4.4%, excluding salary policy and health insurance. Even with this requested increase, the UJS budget will represent a little over 1% of the state's total budget. I call to your attention, once again, the fact that the judiciary is an instrument of the state that actually collects revenue. In the past fiscal year, we collected $25.3 million as compared to our general fund budget of $30.2 million. We returned the entire $25.3 million to various units of government. Approximately $15.5 million went to the counties and school districts, $8.9 million went to the state, and just under $1 million went to the cities. Last spring, my neighbor at the lake spent several months trying to save his shoreline from record-high waters. This involved day and night sandbagging and pumping out water in very foul weather. I asked him why he went to all the trouble. He looked out over the lake and he said, "God is not making any more shoreline these days. What he gave to me, I have an obligation to protect." Besides shoreline, there are a lot of other finite resources in South Dakota that we must manage to the best of our ability. The citizens in rural counties want and expect the kind of local access to the courts they've always enjoyed. This is not a luxury. This is a right. One of our smallest counties, Corson, was faced with the sudden loss of its entire courthouse due to arson. The day after the fire, its citizens began making plans to rebuild the symbol of justice, to once again not only provide justice, but provide it locally. We also have counties that are experiencing a population explosion. Lincoln County, Minnehaha County, and Yankton County have started to significantly expand their court facilities to fulfill present needs and anticipated future growth. They are being congratulated for recognizing these needs and for making the financial commitment to address them. Increased population brings new pressures on a court system. These pressures are not simply caused by increased caseloads. Different cultures with diverse ways of life and different languages must be accommodated. Soren Kierkegaard observed, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward." I see the judicial system in the shape of an hourglass. The top chamber contains the many claims for relief, which are represented by the grains of sand in that hourglass. Some claims never make it to that slender waist of the hourglass, let alone through it. The bench and the bar in South Dakota are committed to broadening meaningful access to the courts for all of our citizens. With limited staffs and even more limited budgets, East River Legal Services and Dakota Plains Legal Services do a superb job of providing legal services to the poor. To augment their efforts, the State Bar created a program called Access to Justice. Its purpose is to provide legal services to those who cannot afford to pay for an attorney and who do not qualify for legal assistance from an existing legal services program. Over 200 lawyers in South Dakota have agreed to accept referral cases from this legal services program. I thank those lawyers for their participation. Their service is greatly appreciated. The Supreme Court recently approved a rule allowing retired attorneys and judges to take emeritus status in the state bar and pay reduced bar dues. They are then allowed to provide free legal services to clients referred by an approved legal services program. This encourages those who wish to volunteer to do so and provides yet another way to make legal services available to people who are unable to afford them. Last year, domestic relations filings rose once again, this time by 10%. An increasing number of our citizens are not represented by an attorney when involved in divorce and child custody cases. To assist these individuals, the UJS has published a packet of divorce forms as well as guides for representing yourself in South Dakota courts. These are designed for use by those who do not possess a legal education and who cannot afford an attorney. They are available for free on the UJS website. In their first 4 months of availability, that website averaged 700 hits per month for these forms. They are also available at a clerk of court's office in any county for a nominal fee. Judging is serious business. My friend, the late governor and Judge Sigurd Anderson, used to say with a twinkle in his eye that it was so serious that it's the only profession that has its own book in the Bible. He pointed out there's no book in the Bible of doctors, dentists, car dealers, just judges. Judges have a daunting task. All litigation feeds toward the slender waist of that hourglass. The judges who hear cases, adjudicate them, and decide them are the narrow opening of that legal hourglass. They work diligently to ensure all cases flow into the bottom chamber of that hourglass. I've been a judge for 22 years. When I was younger and was asked why I became a judge, I did not have what I considered to be a satisfactory answer. 2 years ago, I heard the best answer to that question from Justice Stephen Breyer, who sits on the United States Supreme Court. He said, "A person becomes a judge because it is important work worth doing." After 22 years on the bench, I understand his words. Robert Tarver was an author as well as a longtime trial lawyer and a judge. In his best-selling novel, Anatomy of a Murder, Tarver defines the 4 classes of judges. Judges with neither head nor heart, they are to be avoided at all costs. Judges with head but no heart, they are almost as bad. Then, judges with heart but no head, risky but better than the first 2. Finally, those judges who possess both a head and a heart. South Dakota is richly blessed with judges who possess both a head and a heart. Judging is a difficult and complex task for those in South Dakota who undertake it. Given this fact and in the spirit of cooperation, the UJS has extended an invitation to tribal judges to partner with us and attend our judicial training sessions. The response from the tribal judges has been most welcome, and in our mutual fellowship we have learned much from each other. We have also learned that many of the problems that we face as state judges are common to those who serve as tribal judges. Last year, South Dakota's judiciary received a nationwide recognition as a recipient of the Distinguished Service Award from the National Center for State Courts. The award was given for our commitment to a fair and impartial judiciary. In accepting that award at the Conference of Chief Justices, I noted that I was accepting it on behalf of the 294,747 South Dakotans who stood for a fair and impartial judiciary by casting a vote against proposed Amendment E, commonly known as Jail for Judges, in the 2006 general election. I note with concern the increasing tendency by some in the national media who profess to report or analyze the news, but instead engage in what can only be described as judge bashing. They may condense a trial of several weeks into a 30-second soundbite and then castigate the judge for his or her decision. Even if a mistake was made, judges are human and make mistakes like anyone else. Appellate courts exist to correct these mistakes. We also have an active Judicial Qualifications Commission in South Dakota, which imposes discipline for judicial misconduct both on and off the bench. In the most serious of cases, this can include a forced retirement or removal from the bench. Additionally, there are regular judicial elections that allow for the removal of judges who no longer meet with public approval. Based upon a single decision, calls from some in the national media for a judge's immediate impeachment, suspension, or firing by the executive or legislative branch show a disregard for constitutional separation of powers and for a fair and impartial judiciary. I commend the media within South Dakota for not engaging in this kind of conduct. I realize that many decisions that we make can be controversial, and the First Amendment guarantees the right to state a contrary view. A close call on a controversial issue by our court may not result in unanimous agreement as to how the case should have been decided. Given that fact, the media of this state can examine judicial decisions and comment as it sees fit. From time to time, this will result in criticism of a judicial decision, which is the media's right. For example, our Equal Justice Commission toured the state to invite candid comments from our citizens on how the UJS was doing. in dispensing equal justice. This was done with the knowledge that there would not be universal approval of how we have performed. However, there is a wide gap between the reasoned in-state reporting and the demands from some media outside the state for the immediate removal of perceived incompetent judges from office. Sadly, the result of such howls may be the decline in public respect for the judicial process. To emphasize the important area of Indian law, the Supreme Court by rule now requires the inclusion of an Indian law question on the South Dakota bar exam. Last July was the first time the bar exam contained an Indian law question. I am pleased to inform you that the students who took the exam did exceptionally well on the Indian law question. This is due in large part to the law school at the University of South Dakota. It placed substantial emphasis on Indian law in its curriculum and offered a review course in that area for students preparing to take the bar exam. This new requirement enhances the knowledge of Indian law of those entering the bar, and it ultimately benefits clients seeking professional assistance. The people of South Dakota, through this legislative body, have decided that the death penalty is an appropriate punishment in a limited number of murder cases. The death penalty has been upheld as constitutional both by the United States Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of South Dakota. In 2007, for the first time since 1947, a sentence of death was carried out in South Dakota. In large part, that occurred because the defendant chose to abandon his legal avenues of appeal. In the execution chamber, he was given every opportunity to change his mind and was asked one final time if he wished to say anything. He declined, and the execution proceeded. I was available during the process by an open telephone line. Even at this point, had he chosen to pursue his legal options guaranteed him by the Constitution and the statutes, I would issue an immediate order to stay the execution and allow him to pursue that course. He chose otherwise. Because the execution took place, it's helpful to review how the judicial system treats death penalty cases. In South Dakota, cases that involve the death penalty are taken most seriously by those in the judiciary and the bar. More than one attorney is routinely appointed for the accused. Capable, veteran members of the South Dakota bar have stepped forward and accepted court appointments to represent these defendants. The trial courts have provided expert witnesses to assist in preparing a defense. Significant blocks of time are allocated for preparation and trial of death penalty cases to avoid rush to judgment. If a conviction results, the South Dakota Supreme Court allows 200 pages for briefing on an appeal by each party rather than the normal limit of 40 pages. 3 hours are set aside for oral arguments rather than the normal 50 minutes that's allocated to non-capital cases. The justices spend many months carefully studying the substantial trial record, and our court gives a detailed opinion on the issues the defendant raises on appeal. The members of the judiciary in this state are fully aware of what it is at stake in these cases, and we will continue to do everything possible to make sure the judicial system works as accurately and as fairly as humanly possible. I would like to close with a return trip to the campfire by my lake cabin. Although now retired, my neighbor once managed an entire assembly line process of a major manufacturing company, which required that he travel to many parts of the world. This brought him into contact with all forms of government. Based on his personal wealth of experience, he recently told me that government works best when it is the people's servant. It does not work well when it attempts to be the people's master. This is a 21st century reaffirmation of what our founders believed in 1889 when they created our state motto: under God, the people rule. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
motion to dissolve the joint session is in order. Is there a second? Motion is to dissolve. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. We are dissolved.